Amid, thank you very much for joining me on this Axia product showcase, where our goal is to explain a bit more to our audience why a feature exists, why you've decided to put it in the product, and go over it and explain a bit from the problems to the solution, how we achieve to help our customers. So maybe just a quick introduction, who you are, and what do you do for us for Axia?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin, for organizing this session. I think it's important that we spend the time to discuss the features that we bring. So my name is Hamid. I'm the product owner at Axia, which basically means I help procurement people um, solve their problems using software. Um, and one of the features that I'm proud to be sharing with you today and also our audience is related to code comparison. And um, the real problem that we were facing this year, or our procurement managers are facing, is really related to the consolidation of quotes during the request for quote process, and really making the most cost effective decision possible for the organization. And this has proven to be a difficult task, mainly because the time it takes to put all this information together just takes hours and hours and hours. And as you know, procurement managers don't have, one or two requests that they need to deal with. They have a multitude of requests and high expectations to really bring cost savings and cost efficiency for the organization. So that's why we were really excited about this problem, and we really wanted to jump on it. And essentially, what we're trying to do here for our procurement people is to simplify and accelerate the cycle time that it does take to make a decision once you've received your quotes from your suppliers in a data-driven and objective way. So the result of that is this quote comparison feature. It's the first version of the quote comparison feature, but I think already off the bat it brings a lot of time savings, and I'm excited to present this one today.
That's awesome. Thank you for that great introduction. And can you maybe just to start off the feature showcase how that how that feature works essentially from I'm a buyer, I receive a bunch of quotes from my suppliers and my vendors, and then I need to make a decision, which is, like you said, ultimately the best decision possible on a given RFQ. So can you just show us around a bit how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that you'll see here on the screen is an aggregation of quotes that we basically show side by side. Um, and after doing a lot of user testing and validation, we basically came up with the best configuration that we could to display the information. So, on the left, you'll have your parts, and on the right, you'll have your data that comes from the suppliers. So each card basically represents the supplier's input, and you have a side-by-side comparison of all that information that comes in actually in real time. So every time a quote comes in from your supplier, this quote comparison sheet will be updated. Similarly, if there's revisions to the quote, all of this information is dynamically updated and aggregated for the buyer. So that's the overview that you see here. We have the ability to customize the view. So basically, no matter how many columns that you have, whether it's your part columns or the quote columns, that's fully customizable. So in this case, we have a very simple example with unit price, total price, and the item columns, as well as currency. So if a supplier quotes in USD and another supplier quotes in CAD, the tool is able to actually convert the prices for the buyer in real time using an API that will essentially help you keep everything apples to apples when you're doing a comparison without asking the supplier to quote in a different currency. So for this example, we'll just go with Canadian dollar, and just for fun, I'll select all the columns to be displayed. And once you do that, you'll notice that the view has changed. We have more information being shared, and each supplier basically has the columns that were requested to be displayed. So that's the first feature that we have. The second feature, which I really love, has to do with the selection process. So one of the first feedbacks that we get from our buyers is, I want to quickly know who's the most competitive on the quote. Um, and the way we do that is simply by pressing on this button here. So in one click, you'll essentially see and select all of the lowest prices that have been provided for that given quote. And you can quickly see that there's a lot of differences between all the various suppliers. But for example, Iron Lab has only one competitive part. So I may want to shift this over to another supplier. And you'll notice that I'm able to essentially toggle through um, the various suppliers to come up with a total price selected on a per supplier basis, as well as see the total price of my quote given the selection that I have. So this is really cool. Really saves the buyer time, as we know that they typically, you know, get a bunch of emails, get a bunch of PDFs, start putting this together manually in an Excel, start doing some conditional formatting on their Excel, coming up with all kinds of different ways to do that. Here you have a much simpler way to get to the bottom of what you're looking for in just one click. The next step would really be to make the selection. So now that you have all the suppliers side by side, one interesting uh, input that came from our procurement buyers is, hey, it's nice to see all these prices. And now that I have all these prices next to each other, I can actually start a negotiation with my suppliers to see, can I award this to one or two suppliers instead of maybe three or four, to try and reduce the number of shipments and also lower the overall cost of the quote when maybe a particular supplier is more or less competitive than the other. With the data side by side, you'll be able to easily have that discussion with your suppliers, negotiate different pricing for the quote, and maybe even select a single supplier for your request. Um, but let's say
Amazing.
that's yeah. So that's yeah. There's a lot of power actually that can come from just having this supplier information side by side, knowing where the lowest prices are, and then being able to negotiate from there. So we don't take all the work out for the procurement buyer. It's really a semi-automated process. We really expect the buyer to come here and use this data to go have the productive discussions with their suppliers.
That's amazing. And let me ask maybe the elephant in the room for potentially a couple of buyers and procurement professionals. Let's say my quotes, the quotes I receive from my suppliers, not only include the unit price and the lead time, but maybe an MOQ, so a minimum order quantity. Maybe I have a price breakdown for different quantities. Is there a way to display those information? Can we capture those information and can we display it on the interface afterwards?
Absolutely. So depending on the complexity of your input requirements as a buyer, we have templates that can accommodate basically any customization that you want. And all of that information will make its way back into your quote and item columns. So yeah, if you have MOQ, multi-pricing strategies that you need to implement, that can also be um, part of the view that you customize. So anything's possible. Any number of information that you need for your particular business, we can set up that template very quickly, and that will all be reflected during the quote comparison.
Awesome. In terms of, you've mentioned about quote revision, because this is something that do happens, especially when you do an RFQ, which involves multiple vendors, multiple suppliers. You will receive quotes, and then you can say, "Hey, this one is pretty competitive, but only on a portion of the items." Maybe if I give a quick phone call, I'm able to have a couple of items, a better price on a couple of items. You've mentioned that it's possible to do that negotiation process through the app so the supplier can send a revision of the quote? How does that mechanic work?
It's a really good question, and I think you're basically describing what's coming next for this feature, but that's exactly where we want this to go. So the next step really for the quote comparison in our V2 would be to be able to essentially export this information as a buyer, make your changes, re-import that data as metadata against the quotation, and push that information to the supplier. They would receive a notification saying that here are the requested changes, and the supplier could basically click approve, and then that would basically update the system on behalf of the supplier. So that would really be the next step. It's something that a lot of our current buyers have expressed an interest for. So we're really happy that we're able to put this in the hands of our buyers relatively quickly, and then get this sort of validation in terms of how we can make this cycle time even more accelerated. So definitely coming in the roadmap in Q1 of 2024.
That's awesome. Currently, I know in the same topic that if you ask for a revision, so a supplier could by themselves maybe suggest a lower pricing and just edit it in the app, right?
That's correct. So currently, the way it would work today is that the buyer would be able to use the communication channel, communicate with the supplier in the centralized platform, and request the supplier to revise their quote for any number of items, whether it's the price, lead time, you name it, and they're able to edit the quotation, update that on behalf of the buyer, and then essentially take the decision from there. So we haven't maybe captured that 10 or 20% of extra optimization that we can go and get today, but we're very confident that these types of increments will make the experience even better for the buyer and also save time for the supplier to not have to update that themselves. But currently, we do support that.
Great. In terms of decision making, there's a lot of data. I'm seeing the screen right now. I saw that
Yeah,
you've used the award selection button and you've highlighted the lowest price for every items. Um, do we have a vision, or can we currently, either by exporting some data or directly on the app, could we have an analysis made based on some criterias? Let's say I get a quote with the pricing, with the lead time for each items. I even have multi-pricing for different quantities. Could we have a way to export all of that information into an analysis Excel, for example, where I can just have a selection pre-made, but based on multiple criteria?
yeah. Great question. Currently, what we do support in terms of customization on the application is really towards the lowest price. So when it comes to lead time, we're really relying on the buyer here to take the lead time into consideration. We do display the lead time so you can have a pretty good idea of how long these batches of parts are going to take. And the next step really for us is to parameterize the selection process for the buyer. So it's not just price that becomes a factor. Maybe lead time is the most important factor. Maybe the number of suppliers you can select for a particular project is a criteria. So what we're aiming to bring in the next iteration of this feature is really a way for the buyer to set up their own parameters in the decision-making process that can become standardized for all procurement buyers, and use a rule-based approach for the selection process, along with the ability to export this data in the consolidated view that we see today. So it's not available just yet, but definitely something that we've produced designs for and are discussing with our current clients.
Amazing. And unless I'm wrong, and I'm gonna let you confirm there. But we currently do it with Excel spreadsheet export, so we can export the data in a given template, and then the analysis parameters are already in place, so we can play with it through Excel. But like you said,
That's
it's
correct.
coming inside the application in the future iterations.
Absolutely. You can download all the suppliers' quotes on a supplier per supplier basis. So those exports are definitely available. What we're really trying to do is bring a user interface that's so easy to use and so simple that you don't even want to use Excel anymore. So that's that's been my personal mission this year, is to really um, take take whenever there's an Excel that a procurement manager has to use, really try to eliminate it and provide them all the options on a user interface that accommodates for them. But obviously, um, Excel is quite powerful, so we will be bringing that export in the meantime for sure.
That is amazing. Thank you very much, Samit, for the overview of that feature. Congratulations to you and the team for building that first version. It's amazing. Maybe one last question: what should we showcase next? What is the next most exciting feature that you would like us to go over?
That's a great question. We've been working really hard this year on basically the step that comes after the decision process, which is basically the tracking and managing of all the orders once the request has been decided. So I'm very excited to show you guys the new PO module solution that we've been able to develop this year. And this is another great pain point that our procurement managers and buyers have been facing. There's a high quantity of parts which are late to the plan. Um, there's a high quantity of parts that are required to be shipped on time, acknowledged on time, and the volume, obviously, that we're dealing with for most of our procurement buyers is in the hundreds and 200s of line items that need to be tracked. We've recently introduced a PO solution that essentially in 3 months brought the lateness down to zero. And we've seen really high engagement from suppliers in terms of communicating updates through the PO solution module, reducing emails, reducing unnecessary phone calls, and really having a centralized way to communicate and track all of your parts in a single platform. So that's what I'm excited to share with you next, Kevin, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it as well. Thank you again for your time, and see you on the capsule number 2.
My pleasure.